So here you go.
Okay, so yes, as you already mentioned, my name is Sławomir Dzido. I'm a PhD student at the University of Strathclyde. I'm supervised by Dr. David Comerford and Dr. Grant Allen. And the title of my presentation today is People Do Not Want the Burden of Carbon Taxes. How else can macroeconomic policymakers finance the transition to net zero economy? Although it might be rephrased a bit because people simply don't like taxes in general. So how can we go around that? Okay, so I understand that economics can be frightening for some people. So I'll try to make those complex things a bit less intimidating. So firstly, I will start with some background and provide some rationale for pursuing my study. And then I will explain the method that I employ, because I also rely on kind of interdisciplinary methodology, because I blend economics with mathematics and programming. Then I will show you the model that I've developed. And lastly, of course, I will point out some key takeaways. Okay. So I'm sure you all are well aware of the treaties like the Paris Agreement or the Kyoto Protocol. So these are the result of more and more scientific evidence coming about the closeness and severity of the climate change. So many countries have agreed to limit the rise in global average temperatures to well below 2 degrees. So hence, this narrative has switched from whether to mitigate the climate change to how. But probably we are also aware that the solution to the problem of the climate transition is very likely to be costly. So for example, just for the UK, the total investment required for achieving the net zero is estimated at £1 trillion. So if Jeff Bezos and his net worth was a currency, then that would be about 5 Bezos. So overall, my research aims to provide explore some ways of plausible financing of the transition to the net zero economy from the perspective of macroeconomic policymakers. And that today's theme is the economics of conducting climate policy through financial market interventions. So to date, usually economists produce the optimal climate policy in the form of carbon taxes. For example, the famous paper by Golov and colleagues estimate the optimal carbon tax at between $60 and $500 per ton. Meanwhile, quite a fresh example from the referendum in the state of Washington in 2018, voters rejected the proposed carbon tax of only $15 per ton. So only because if we compare it with the theoretically optimal one, it's very, very small. So there are clear political constraints associated with the introduction of such global carbon tax. As I said, people just don't like taxes in general, so it makes it very unpopular among voters and hence the politicians. But financial market might offer some help with decentralizing this funding from the state expenditure onto firms and investors, for example, in the form of green bonds. Now, digging deeper into the financial market, it can be observed that usually pension funds are tax exempt. So it can come in a variety of ways. Usually, the pension funds don't pay any income tax on their activities, or we as individuals are relieved, tax relieved on our pension contributions. At the same time, globally, pension funds are estimated to hold over $50 trillion in total assets. So that's a large pool of money that this large pool of money makes us wonder if we maybe could tap into it a bit and reallocate those resources in a relatively sustainable manner without causing at the same time too much disruptions in the market. So in this fashion, specifically, I want to evaluate the effectiveness of a potential regulation which would require pension funds to invest in green projects in return for their existing tax relief advantages. I believe it has a potential to be more acceptable politically because it shouldn't affect people directly. Okay, so moving on to my method. So the nature of this problem is ex ante. So usually it's easier in general to evaluate something after it happened. Here, unfortunately, we have to evaluate prospective policy before it's actually implemented. So it calls for a modeling approach. What we mean by an economic model. So in general, a model can be perceived as a very simplified image of reality. It requires certain assumptions about how things work in the economy and model it accordingly. Obviously, economic models are subject to wide criticism because obviously reality is just too complex to be modeled precisely. But as my supervisor once beautifully said, a map is also an imperfect simplification of the actual terrain, yet it allows us to navigate and guide us through the world and identify the key points. And I believe it says it all and about the rightness of the approach. So the results that we can obtain don't have to be necessarily super precise, as long as they provide us with some key insights into the process. Okay, so I rely on the overlapping generations model developed by Peter Diamond. And why would that be appropriate for this particular concept? So this model assumes that there are two generations of people living at the same time in the economy. Young individuals or workers who are continually being born and entering the labor force, and older individuals or pensioners who are continually dying. And also, it's assumed that the workers in the current period become the pensioners in the next period. So it makes it like it seems like a natural framework for the study of both pension-related and investment-related issues. So I use this model to model my proposition, and then I simulate the outcomes. And then the ultimate question is, how does this solution affect the social welfare when compared to conventional carbon taxes? So essentially, is it worth the interest in the first place? Okay, so now scary equations. So now we already know what an economic model in general is. Here, by a model, we mean a set of equations which characterize the key variables in the economy. So first of all, we have a perspective of an individual worker who wants to maximize his or her welfare. And how do we approximate the welfare? So we assume that welfare is derived from consumption today, but also consumption in the next period when the worker becomes the pensioner. But also we assume that the state of environment or the environmental quality also matters for the well-being or welfare for a variety of reasons, ranging from the health impacts associated with pollution to economic risks associated with climate change. And it also matters so the state of the environment today matters to the worker, but also the state of the environment in the following years when he becomes the pensioner. And this maximization problem needs to be optimized with respect to the individual budget constraint. So it's very simple. We all earn a wage, and let's say that we earn only this wage, and it needs to finance our consumption needs. But recall that we also are interested in consumption when we become old. So then we no longer earn any wage, and yet we have to accumulate some savings to be able to consume. So here we have two types of savings, which in essence constitute our pension contributions. So I disentangle regular savings, or which can be thought of as brown investments, so investment in machinery and so on, which the pension funds reallocate. So this brown investment provides us with a tangible return. So actually it constitutes our pension when we become pensioners. This money will be paid out to us with some return. But because it's invested in brown machinery, it will also affect the environment negatively. So it will result in increased emissions. But we can also decide to invest in green projects, which don't provide us with any monetary return, but they do improve, these investments improve the environment, which we also care about. Okay, so that's our maximization problem. But we have also some variables which evolve independently of our decisions. So the stock of capital, of physical capital, essentially depends on our investment, so those brown savings today. And environmental quality evolves according to this. So essentially, environment tomorrow depends on the state of the environment today, and it's reduced or harmed by emissions produced by production capabilities as a result of investment in brown capital, but it can be outweighed by our spending in green projects. And so that's the perspective of an individual worker. But here we imagine a perfect ideal world with no taxes, and we employ a so-called social planner. So this theoretical social planner aims to maximize the welfare of all people in the world and all generations to come in the future. And
sorry, Sławomir,
yeah.
We have just 2 minutes.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so this ideal scenario, which I simulate with the use of computer programming, can be described by these two graphs, which you don't have to really fully understand what's going on here, but they do tell us a nice story. So essentially, it tells us that we don't necessarily have to reduce our consumption if we decide to pursue our environmental goals. Economy can still grow, so it doesn't have to suffer. And here, when I juxtapose abatement and environment, we can notice that it requires huge initial green investment in order for the environment to improve, which is very like real world like, because 2050 is fast approaching, so we have to raise our investment abruptly. But then as the environment improves, it can be reduced. So we don't have to forever sustain this huge green investment spending. Okay, so now let's move quickly. So that was this ideal scenario with no taxes. but then I model a situation from the perspective of an individual worker, and I apply an income tax, which then can be redistributed as a subsidy to green investment. So that's the situation which I was talking about before. That's my concept. And using this tax, we want to find an optimal one, which will make this decentralized solution to mimic this perfect solution developed by the social planner. And what are the key takeaways? So I won't bore you with a specific tax schedule, because it's up to this point it's been theoretical. So the model will still need to be adjusted to actual data to make it policy relevant. But these theoretical results are nevertheless very promising, because they suggest that climate policy could be designed in this way. It seems that my proposition carries no significant social welfare loss when compared to traditional carbon taxes. So it means essentially that this concept is at least good as carbon taxes in terms of efficiency. And I hope that the final results will confirm it, and I believe that it will be indeed easier to sell to the public, and thereby proving more politically feasible. Okay, so lastly, I think that my research overall highlights the importance of cooperation with the financial sector overall in tackling the climate change, because government spending on its own will never be enough. Thank you very much. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Sławomir, for your talk.